Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we unravel Pickman's Model by H.P. Lovecraft, a tale of art, madness, and unspeakable horror. This version has been reimagined and rewritten in English, crafted to grip you with fresh suspense and cinematic intensity.
Don't mistake me for a madman, Eliot. People cling to stranger quirks than mine. Oliver's grandfather still refuses to ride in a motor car, after all. If I despise the subway, that's my affair. The taxi brought us here faster anyway and spared us the climb from Park Street. Yes, I'm more tightly wound than when you saw me last year, but don't play the physician with me. I've reasons enough, and I count myself fortunate to remain sane at all. Why this interrogation? You never used to pry so deeply. Still, if you insist on knowing, perhaps you should. You kept writing me like a worried parent when you heard I'd abandoned the art club and distanced myself from Pickman. Since his disappearance, I've returned to the club now and then, though my nerves are frayed beyond repair. No, I don't know where Pickman has gone, and I dread to imagine. You may suspect I had inside knowledge when I severed ties, and you'd be right. That's why I refuse to speculate. Let the police chase shadows. They'll find little, especially since they've yet to discover the North End cellar he rented under the name Peters. Even I could scarcely locate it again, and God knows I'd never try, not even at noon beneath a blazing sun. I fear I know why he kept that place, and you'll understand soon enough why I never told the authorities. They'd demand I guide them back, but I could not. Something lurked there, and now I cannot set foot in a subway, nor descend into any cellar without trembling. Don't think I abandoned Pickman for the petty reasons that drove Reed, Minot, or Bosworth away. Morbid art never repelled me. When a man possesses genius like Pickman's, it is an honor to know him, no matter how dark his vision. Boston has never seen a greater painter than Richard Upton Pickman. I said it then, and I say it now. Even when he unveiled that dreadful canvas, Ghoul Feeding. You remember, that was the moment Minot turned his back. I did not.
You see, Eliot, it takes more than paint and canvas to conjure terror. It takes vision. Any hack can smear colors together and call it a nightmare, a witch's gathering, or even the devil himself. But only a true artist can make you believe it, make you feel the chill crawl down your spine. That's because only a master understands the anatomy of dread, the lines that awaken buried instincts, the shadows that stir ancient memories of fear, the colors that ignite the sense of strangeness we try so hard to forget. That's why a Fuseli painting makes us shiver, while a cheap ghost story illustration only earns a laugh. Doré had that gift, Cimé had it, Angarola of Chicago had it, and Pickman. Pickman possessed it more than any man before him, or, God willing, any man ever again. Don't ask me what it is they see. Ordinary artists sketch from models, from nature, from what lies before them. But the truly uncanny ones, they summon visions from somewhere else, from a world that presses against ours, but remains unseen. Their work is not imitation, it is revelation. That's why Pickman's canvases were not dreams, but windows. If I had ever seen what Pickman saw... No, I dare not finish that thought. Let's drink instead. For if I had glimpsed what he beheld, I would not be alive to speak of it. You remember, his genius was in faces. No one since Goya could twist a human expression into such pure damnation. And before Goya, you'd have to look back to the medieval sculptors, the ones who carved gargoyles and chimeras into Notre Dame and Mont Saint-Michel. They believed in things, perhaps even saw them. The Middle Ages were strange that way. I recall you once asked Pickman yourself, before you left, where in heaven or hell he found such visions. Do you remember that laugh, Eliot? That sharp, unsettling laugh? It was enough to drive Reed away. Reed, with all his pompous talk of pathology and evolution, claimed Pickman's very features were changing, twisting into something less than human. He muttered about diet, about eccentric habits, about abnormalities that made Pickman a creature apart. Perhaps he was right, or perhaps his imagination simply buckled under the weight of those paintings. I told him so at the time. But understand this, I didn't abandon Pickman for such reasons. Quite the opposite. My admiration only deepened. That canvas, Ghoul Feeding, was a revelation. The club refused to exhibit it. The Museum of Fine Arts rejected it, and no collector dared to buy it. So Pickman kept it in his own home, until the day he vanished. Now it rests in Salem with his family, descendants of old witch blood, one ancestor hanged in 1692. I began visiting him often, especially once I started drafting notes for a monograph on weird art. His work was a treasure trove of insight, and he shared it freely. He showed me everything, paintings, sketches, even pen and ink horrors that would have expelled him from the club had they been seen. I became his disciple, listening for hours as he spun theories wild enough to earn him a cell in Danvers Asylum. My devotion, coupled with his growing isolation, made him trust me deeply. And one evening, with a conspiratorial gleam, he hinted that if I could keep my mouth shut, and if my nerves were strong enough, he would reveal something far beyond the canvases in his house, something darker, something stronger. You see, he told me, there are truths that don't belong on Newbury Street, things too raw, too ancient to be imagined in these polished, artificial avenues. My work is to capture the echoes of the soul, and you won't find those in a neighborhood built on reclaimed land. Back Bay isn't Boston. It hasn't lived long enough to gather memories, to attract spirits. The ghosts here are tame, born of salt marshes and shallow coves. But I crave human ghosts, souls that have stared into hell and understood what they saw.
The North End, that's where an artist belongs. If any aesthete were honest, he'd endure the slums for the sake of tradition. Those streets weren't manufactured, they grew. Generations lived, suffered, and died there, back when people weren't afraid to feel life in its full terror. Copp's Hill had a mill in 1632, and half those crooked streets were laid out by 1650. I can show you houses that have stood for centuries, houses that have witnessed horrors that would reduce a modern building to dust. What do we know of life now? You call Salem's witchcraft a delusion, but my own ancestor, hanged on Gallows Hill in 1692, could have told you truths that Cotton Mather dared not write. Damn him! He feared someone might break free of this prison of monotony. I wish some midnight spell had drained the sanctimony from his veins. I can show you the house he lived in, and another he feared to enter, despite all his bold sermons. He knew things, but he buried them in silence. And listen, do you realize the North End once had tunnels? Secret veins beneath the city, linking houses, graveyards, and the sea.
Let the authorities rage above ground. Down there, life went on untouched. Voices whispered in the dark, and laughter echoed at night from places no one could name. Listen, Thurber. Out of 10 houses still standing from before 1700, I'd wager 8 hide something strange in their cellars. Every month you hear of workmen uncovering bricked arches, sealed wells, tunnels that lead nowhere. Just last year, near Henchman Street, you could glimpse one from the elevated tracks. Witches and the things they summoned, pirates and their spoils from the sea, smugglers, privateers, men who knew how to live, how to push beyond the limits of this world. Compare that to today, when so-called artists faint at anything darker than a Beacon Street tea table scene. Pathetic. The only mercy of the present age is its stupidity. It never dares to question the past too closely. Maps, records, guidebooks, they tell you nothing of the North End. I could lead you through 30 or 40 alleys north of Prince Street, passages unknown to all but the immigrants who swarmed them. And even they don't grasp their meaning. These ancient places are dreaming still, overflowing with wonder, terror, and escape from the ordinary. Yet no one alive understands them. No one. Except me. I haven't been digging into the past for nothing.
You're drawn to this sort of thing, Thurber. What if I told you I keep another studio there? A place where the night itself breathes antique horror, where I paint visions I could never imagine on Newbury Street. Of course, I don't tell the club. Those cursed old maids whisper already that I'm some monster sliding backward into evolution. Let them whisper. I decided long ago that terror must be painted from life, just as beauty must. So I went searching in places where terror truly lives. I found a house, one I doubt 3 living men of Nordic blood have ever seen. It isn't far from the Elevated in distance, but in spirit it lies centuries away. I chose it for the old brick well in the cellar, one of the kind I've told you about. The shack is collapsing, so no one else would dare live there. I pay next to nothing for it. The windows are boarded, which suits me fine. I don't want daylight for the work I do. I paint in the cellar, where the air is thick with inspiration. The ground floor I've furnished for comfort. The deed belongs to a Sicilian, but I rent it under the name Peters. Thurber, if you've got the nerve, I'll take you there tonight. You'll see the kind of work I can't show on Newbury Street. The canvases where I've truly let myself go. It's not far. I usually walk. A taxi would only draw attention in that neighborhood. We'll take the shuttle from South Station to Battery Street. Then it's just a short walk. What choice did I have after that challenge? I forced myself to keep pace, though every instinct screamed to bolt for the nearest cab. We switched to the Elevated at South Station, and by midnight we were descending the steps at Battery Street, moving along the old waterfront past Constitution Wharf. I lost track of the cross streets. We turned somewhere, though I know it wasn't Greenough Lane. The alley we entered was the oldest, filthiest passage I'd ever seen. Gables sagged, windows shattered, chimneys crumbled against the moonlit sky. Most of those houses had stood since Cotton Mather's time. I swear I glimpsed 2 with overhangs, and even thought I saw the peaked roofline of a pre-gambrel house, though antiquarians insist none remain in Boston. From that dim alley we slipped left into an even narrower one, utterly dark. A sharp bend, then silence. Pickman's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a worm-eaten 10-paneled door that looked centuries old. He unlocked it and led me into a barren hallway, its dark oak paneling whispering of Andros, Phipps, and the witchcraft trials. Through another door, he lit an oil lamp and told me to make myself at home.
Now, Elliot, I've always considered myself hard-boiled, but what I saw on those walls nearly broke me. They were his forbidden paintings, the ones too grotesque for Newbury Street. And he was right. He had let himself go. God help me, I needed a drink the moment I saw them. Elliot, words fail me. No description could capture the blasphemous horror, the sickening stench of evil that radiated from those canvases. It wasn't exotic fantasy like Syme's dreamscapes, nor the alien fungi of Clark Ashton Smith. No, Pickman's settings were familiar, chillingly ordinary. Churchyards, shadowed woods, sea cliffs, brick tunnels, paneled rooms, vaults of stone. Copp's Hill burying ground just blocks away appeared again and again. But the true madness lay in the figures. Pickman's art was portraiture of the damned. They were rarely human, though they hovered close. Bipedal shapes slumped forward, faces twisted with a canine cast, bodies slick with a rubbery texture that made the skin crawl. I can still see them, feeding, always feeding. Sometimes in groups, clawing over their spoils in cemeteries or tunnels, sometimes leaping through windows, crouching on sleepers, tearing at throats. One canvas showed them circling a hanged witch on Gallows Hill, her dead face bearing their same ghastly kinship. But don't think it was the grotesque themes alone that shook me. I've seen horrors before. It was the faces, Elliot, the faces. They leered, they drooled, they breathed with a life that should not exist. By God, I swear, they were alive. Pickman's brush was no mere tool. It was a wand, conjuring nightmares from the pit itself. Pour me another drink, Elliot. I need it. There was one canvas, Elliot, that I pray I could forget. Pickman called it the lesson. Imagine a circle of nameless, dog-like creatures squatting in a churchyard, teaching a child to feed as they did. A changeling, no doubt, the old legend made flesh. Pickman was showing us what becomes of the stolen babes, how they grow, how they inherit the hunger of their captors. And in those faces, human and inhuman alike, I saw a grotesque kinship. He was charting an evolution, a descent. The beasts were born of mortals.
And as the thought struck me, my eyes fell upon another canvas, a Puritan interior, heavy beams, lattice windows, clumsy 17th-century furniture. A family gathered reverently as the father read from Scripture. Every face noble, devout, save one. A young man, his features twisted with mockery, kin to the unclean things, their changeling. And in a cruel jest, Pickman had painted the face with a resemblance to his own. By then, Pickman had lit a lamp in the adjoining room, holding the door open with a polite smile. He asked if I wished to see his modern studies. I could barely speak, too shaken with disgust and terror, but he seemed to take my silence as praise. "Elliot, you know I'm no coward. I've seen war. I've faced death. I had steadied myself after those colonial nightmares, convinced I could endure more. But when I stepped into that next room, the scream tore from me unbidden. I clutched the doorway to keep from collapsing. The first chamber had shown ghouls and witches overrunning the past, but this one dragged the horror into our present lives. God, Elliot, Pickman could paint like no other.
One canvas, Subway Accident, showed a swarm of those vile creatures clawing their way up from some hidden catacomb, bursting through the cracked floor of the Boylston Street subway and descending upon terrified commuters. Another depicted a grotesque dance among the tombs of Copp's Hill, set against the backdrop of modern Boston. And everywhere, cellars, tunnels, forgotten chambers, his monsters lurked, grinning from the shadows, crouched behind barrels and furnaces, waiting for the first unlucky soul to step down the stairs. One canvas sickened me beyond the rest. A vast cross-section of Beacon Hill, honeycombed with burrows through which armies of the creatures swarmed like ants. Another showed them gathered in a vault, clustered around one who held a Boston guidebook, reading aloud. Their faces twisted with laughter, so convulsive, so hideously alive, that I almost heard the echoes myself. The title chilled me. Holmes, Lowell, and Longfellow lie buried in Mount Auburn. As I steadied myself in that chamber of deviltry, I began to understand the source of my revulsion. First, it was the sheer inhumanity, the cruelty Pickman reveled in, the degradation of flesh and spirit. He seemed an enemy of mankind itself. Second, it was the terrifying conviction of his art. These weren't blurred fantasies or distorted caricatures. Every outline was sharp, every detail painfully precise. His brush didn't invent, it revealed. And the faces, Eliot, those faces, they stared from the canvas with a life that should not exist, leering, slavering, breathing. By God, they were alive.
Eliot, what we saw was no artist's fancy. It was pandemonium itself, rendered with merciless clarity. Pickman was no dreamer, no romantic. He didn't dabble in shimmering illusions or surreal ephemera. His canvases were cold reflections of a world of horror, stable, mechanistic, undeniable. God alone knows where he glimpsed those blasphemous shapes that slithered or crawled across his imagination. But one truth was plain. Pickman was a realist, a scientist of nightmares. Every stroke was precise, every detail exact, as if he had studied the anatomy of hell itself. He led me down into the cellar, and I braced myself for what awaited among the unfinished canvases. At the bottom of the damp stairs, his flashlight swept across the room and revealed a circular brick well in the earthen floor. 5 feet wide, walls thick and ancient. 17th century work, I'd swear. Pickman explained it was part of the old network of tunnels beneath the hill. I noticed it wasn't sealed, only covered by a heavy wooden disc. The thought of what might lurk below made me shiver. We stepped through a narrow door into his studio, a fair-sized room with a wooden floor lit by the harsh glow of acetylene gas. The unfinished paintings scattered across easels were as ghastly as the finished ones upstairs. Each scene was meticulously blocked out, penciled lines marking perspective and proportion with surgical precision. Even in horror, Pickman's discipline was absolute. He was great. I admit it even now, knowing what I know. On a table sat a large camera. Pickman explained he used it to capture backgrounds, painting from photographs rather than dragging his equipment across the city. To him, a photograph was as good as life itself. He employed them regularly, he said. And in that moment, Eliot, I began to wonder, what else did he photograph? What models did he use? The thought chilled me more than the canvases themselves.
The cellar seemed alive with those nauseating sketches, half-finished monstrosities leering from every side. And then Pickman pulled a canvas from the shadows.
Elliot. I couldn't hold back the scream. It tore from me, echoing through the vaults like a cry from the damned. I nearly collapsed into hysterical laughter, so great was the shock. Merciful God, I still don't know if what I saw was real or fever-born. It felt too immense, too vile for this earth to contain. The painting was a blasphemy incarnate. A crouching beast with glaring red eyes, its bony claws clutching what had once been a man. It gnawed at the head with the casual delight of a child chewing candy. At any moment, I thought, it might drop its prey and lunge for something fresher. Its dog-like face, pointed ears, bloodshot eyes, flat nose, drooling lips, was horror enough. Its claws, its mold-caked body, its half-hoof feet, any one of these could drive a weaker man to madness. But, Elliot, it wasn't the subject that froze my soul. It was the technique, the cursed, unnatural technique. The canvas breathed. The monster glared and gnawed and glared, alive in pigment. No mortal hand could paint such a thing without a model, without a glimpse into the abyss itself. Pickman had seen something no man, unsold to the fiend, should ever see. And then I noticed it, a scrap of paper thumbtacked to the canvas, curled and yellowed. A photograph, I thought, perhaps meant to serve as background for the nightmare? I reached to uncurl it. At that instant, Pickman stiffened as if struck. He had been listening intently since my scream shattered the silence, and now his face showed a fear more physical than spiritual. Without a word, he drew a revolver, motioned me to silence, and slipped out into the main cellar, closing the door behind him.
For a moment, I was frozen, listening as Pickman did. Somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard scurrying, squeals, bleats, faint and directionless. The thought of enormous rats made me shudder. Then came a clatter, furtive and groping, like heavy wood striking stone. It echoed again, louder, vibrating as if something had fallen deeper than before. My skin crawled. Suddenly, there was a grating noise, Pickman's guttural shout, and then the deafening roar of his revolver, 6 shots fired in rapid succession, like a lion tamer cracking his whip. A muffled squeal, a thud, more scraping of wood and brick. Then silence. The door burst open, and Pickman reappeared, weapons smoking, muttering curses at the bloated rats that infested the ancient well. "The devil knows what they feed on," he grinned. "Those tunnels touch graveyards, witch dens, even the sea. Whatever it is, they're hungry, and your scream stirred them up. Best be cautious in these old places. Rodents are a nuisance, but sometimes they add atmosphere." That was the end of the night's adventure. Pickman had promised to show me his hidden studio, and God knows he had. He led me out through a maze of alleys until we reached a familiar street, Charter Street, though I barely noticed in my daze. Too late for the elevated, we walked back through Hanover Street. I remember that walk vividly. At Beacon, Pickman left me at the corner of Joy. I never spoke to him again. Why did I abandon him? Patience, Elliot. Let me call for coffee. We've had enough of stronger stuff. It wasn't the paintings, though they alone would have damned him in Boston society. No, the reason was deeper. And perhaps now you understand why I cannot bear subways or cellars. Elliot, it was something I found in my coat the next morning. Do you remember that curled scrap of paper pinned to the canvas in the cellar? I thought it was just a photograph of some background he meant to use. In the chaos of that night, I must have crumpled it into my pocket without realizing. When I unfolded it the next day, I understood everything. That paper was the reason I abandoned Pickman. Richard Upton Pickman, the greatest artist I have ever known and the foulest creature ever to crawl beyond the bounds of life into myth and madness? Reed was right. He wasn't entirely human. Whether born of shadow or damned by forbidden knowledge, he had crossed a gate no mortal should ever open. And now he is gone, back into the darkness he worshipped. Don't ask me what I burned, or what lay behind the scrambling he called rats. There are secrets older than Salem, whispered by Cotton Mather himself. You remember how lifelike his paintings were, how we all wondered where he found those faces. Well, Eliot, that paper wasn't a background at all. It showed the very monster he was painting, the model itself. And the background was nothing more than the cellar wall captured in minute detail. By God, Eliot, it was a photograph from life.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.